When I opened the front door that Thursday night, I was immediately struck by how loud the silence had become inside my own home. A silence that didn't just hang in the air like stillness, but pressed itself against my chest like a weight I didn't remember agreeing to carry. It wasn't always like this. I used to come home to the scent of simmering garlic from her pasta sauce or the distant sound of her humming to some 80s song she half remembered. Her way of telling me that despite the bills and the stress and the grind, this house was our safe place. But now, the only thing that greeted me was the faint buzz of her phone vibrating on the kitchen island and the slight rustle of her fingertips tapping the screen without ever once glancing in my direction. I stood there, holding the door like a fool, my briefcase still in my hand, coat still zipped, waiting for a smile that didn't come and realizing it hadn't come in months. She didn't even ask me how my day was, which I guess I should have stopped expecting after week 5 of her being too tired to talk, or week 7 of, why do you always need to vent when you come home? Her tone had sharpened gradually, like a blade being honed behind my back, each conversation cutting shorter and colder until all that was left between us were sighs and obligations. I had spent the better part of the last 6 months convincing myself that this was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe menopause was hitting early. Maybe work was draining her. But what I couldn't explain away anymore was the absence of everything she used to be. The laughter that used to echo off these walls like wind chimes in spring had been replaced by scrolling screens, locked doors, and half-hearted excuses that stank of cheap perfume and unfamiliar cologne. That night, though, something shifted, not in her, but in me. Maybe it was the way she sighed loudly when I asked her if she wanted to eat dinner together, like I just ruined her evening by existing. Or maybe it was the way she muttered, just order something, I'm not hungry, without looking up, like a tired receptionist brushing off a client. I stood at the foot of the stairs, listening to her heels click away into the bedroom that now felt more like a showroom than a shared space, and I finally let the weight of her indifference settle into my bones. Not rage, not heartbreak, not yet, but something colder, something quieter, like the first snap of ice before a lake freezes over completely. And I knew, right then, that whatever was left of my marriage wasn't dying, it was already dead. I just hadn't held the funeral yet. It started the way these things always do, small, sharp words tossed like pebbles against a window, harmless at first glance, but persistent enough to crack something if you don't stop them. That night, it was the wrong wine, apparently, a bottle I grabbed on the way home from work without knowing she had already planned to drink something nicer. She just sneered when I set it on the counter and asked, "This was the best you could do?" I stood there, watching her pour herself a glass with the elegance of someone pretending they hadn't already emptied half the bottle before I walked through the door, and for reasons I still don't understand, I tried to make conversation. Some pathetic attempt to pull the night back from the edge, like trying to save a burning bridge after the supports are already gone. The moment unraveled fast, the way dry rope catches flame. 1 second you're holding something, and the next you're watching it disintegrate between your fingers. Her voice got louder, her tone sharper, each word more loaded than the last until finally, glassy-eyed and grinning like she just won something, she looked at me with that smug tilt of her head and said the line that would echo in my skull long after she'd stumbled off to bed. "You'll never do better than me. You peaked when you married me. Look at you now. You're just a washed-up nobody who got lucky once." The house, our house, stood still like it was listening. And me? I just stood there, staring at the woman I had built my life around, realizing she had been chiseling me down for years and tonight was the final blow. Without a word, I walked upstairs and pulled out my old duffel bag, the one I hadn't touched since my last work trip 2 years ago. I moved slowly, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel every second of that choice. Every shirt folded, every drawer closed. Every piece of my life I was finally reclaiming. I just walked out into the night with nothing but that bag over my shoulder and the echo of her laughter bouncing off the walls behind me like a taunt. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, or maybe it was just the quiet that follows after you stop pretending to be loved. The first night I slept in my brother's basement, the silence was different than the one I'd left behind. This one wasn't filled with tension or unspoken hatred, but with the kind of emptiness that settles in after a wrecking ball has passed through and all that remains is dust and the bitter echo of everything you lost. I stared up at the unfinished ceiling, wooden beams and exposed pipes overhead, while my duffel bag sat in the corner next to a laundry basket I hadn't touched since college. My life had shrunk down to this: a borrowed mattress, a toolbox I hadn't opened in months, an old laptop with a cracked screen, and a head that wouldn't stop replaying the moment she looked me in the eye and told me I was forgettable. My brother, God bless him, Tried to talk to me like it was just a bad month, like I'd get back on my feet and land a job soon. But what he didn't know was that the day after I left, she drained our joint savings, maxed out the credit cards, and lawyered up before I'd even figured out where to get my next meal. It was like waking up to find you'd been robbed. But the thief didn't break in. She already had the keys and knew exactly where you kept the good stuff. The divorce consultation was a gut punch I never saw coming. I walked into that office thinking we'd talk about splitting furniture and figuring out the mortgage. But instead she painted me like I was the deadweight she'd been carrying for years, lazy, controlling. Emotionally cold, her words, not mine. And the worst part? I just sat there and took it, numb and stunned, because a part of me still believed the woman sitting across from me was someone I once loved. That illusion shattered when a friend of mine, someone who worked at the gym she used to frequent, texted me late one night and said, "Hey, man. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but she's been seeing that yoga guy, the bald one, the one she used to joke about being too spiritual. Been going on a while, like before you even moved out." That was the moment I realized none of this was new to her. I hadn't stumbled into a marriage falling apart. I had been sleepwalking through a performance she had already written, rehearsed, and finalized months ago. I started piecing it all together: the mysterious overtime, the coldness, the sudden obsession with fitness, the new lingerie tags I found once in the trash but convinced myself were a gift for me. I had ignored the signs like a man refusing to read the eviction notice pinned to his own door, thinking if I just kept showing up, it would all work out in the end. But it didn't. She had burned the bridge and walked across the ashes with someone else. And me? I was stuck in my brother's basement, 30 pounds heavier than I'd been in college, with a wallet full of credit card debt and a future that looked like a fogged-up windshield at midnight. But in that basement, with nothing left to lose and no one left to impress, something started to crack open in me. Not rage, not revenge, not yet. A whisper that said, "You're not done yet." They say desperation either destroys you or reintroduces you to the parts of yourself you buried under survival, and in my case, I guess it did both. I remember sitting on that rickety folding chair in my brother's basement, the air thick with damp insulation and the stale scent of a dryer sheet graveyard, staring at the metal skeleton of something I hadn't touched since I sketched it on a napkin 6 years earlier. It was a redesign for a clamp. Yeah, a clamp, of all things. The kind you use 100 times a week on construction jobs without thinking twice, until it slips or binds or chews up material and costs you more than you realize. I'd spent my career dealing with these little inefficiencies that no one talked about because we were all too damn tired to fix them. And here I was, broke, humiliated, tossed out of my marriage like last week's leftovers, with nothing but time. And suddenly that napkin drawing felt like the only thing left in my life that still made sense. I started prototyping with borrowed tools and scrap metal from the yard of a retired contractor I knew from back in the day, a guy who only lent them to me because I offered to detail his pickup and repaint his garage door. Every night after my temp shifts, stocking shelves, or unloading freight at the docks, I'd come back to that concrete dungeon and hammer, sand, drill, tweak. At first, it was just something to do that wasn't crying or staring at the ceiling wondering how the hell I'd gone from homeowner to afterthought. But then something started to click, not just in the design, but in me. For the first time since the split, I didn't feel useless. I didn't feel like just a man who'd been discarded. I felt like a builder again, not just of things, but of ideas, of identity, of purpose. So I kept working, despite the sideways glances from my brother, despite the friends who smirked when I mentioned it over beers, and despite my own doubts that whispered maybe she was right, maybe you really did peak already. I remember the moment I showed it to my cousin Ryan, who works in a commercial HVAC crew, and he squinted at it for a second, turned it over in his hand, and said, "Neat idea, I guess, but no one's gonna buy it." That's when I realized I was chasing something bigger than their approval. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. I was trying to prove to myself that I hadn't been broken, only buried. And somewhere in that process of quiet obsession, calloused fingers, late-night research on patents and molds and industrial suppliers, a shift happened. I stopped living in the wreckage of my old life and started building the foundation of something new, and this time, I wasn't asking anyone for permission to dream. You'd think rock bottom has a floor, that there's a limit to how far someone can fall before they finally stop crashing, catch their breath, and start clawing their way back up. But let me tell you something nobody warns you about. Betrayal isn't a one-time stab in the back. It's a slow, methodical carving, and the worst part is when the knife is held by someone you trusted with both hands. I was in my brother's garage, finishing up another prototype with grease-stained knuckles and a YouTube tutorial echoing in the background, when I got the text that changed everything. It was from a mutual friend, someone we both used to vacation with, and all it said was, "You should see what she just posted." I'm so sorry, man. My hands froze mid-turn on the wrench. I opened the link and saw it, my wife, or soon-to-be ex, sitting across from my best friend, grinning like the cat that got the cream, in the very booth we used to sit in every year on our anniversary, the steakhouse where I proposed. The place I once saved 3 months of overtime to afford one single night of elegance for her. There they were, glasses raised, faces glowing under the caption, "When you finally find someone who treats you right." It wasn't just a slap in the face, it was a full-on public execution of my character. She wasn't just cheating, she was celebrating it like she'd upgraded her life while I rotted beneath the wreckage of what she burned down. And if that wasn't enough, I started hearing whispers around town. People who used to nod politely when they saw me now looked sideways. Women I barely knew avoided eye contact, and even my mechanic, my guy, asked if everything was okay at home, in a tone that told me he already knew the answer. That's when I found out she'd been spreading a narrative, telling people I was emotionally abusive, that I was unstable, that I pushed her to leave by withholding affection, and never supporting her goals. Never mind the fact that I once worked a second shift for 2 years straight just to help her start that boutique yoga brand she gave up on 3 months later. Never mind that I paid for every conference, every self-improvement seminar, every luxury retreat she swore would help her find herself. In her version, she was the victim, and I was just a villain in her story. I didn't run around correcting the record or posting rebuttals. What I did instead was simple. I took screenshots. Every caption, every tag location, every message that found its way to me from someone who couldn't believe the lies she was spewing. I started a folder on my laptop labeled Receipts and filled it with silent ammunition. Just quiet, calculated preparation. Because while she was busy poisoning the well and flaunting her new man like he was some trophy for surviving the horror of me, I was building something far more powerful than a comeback. I was constructing a legacy, brick by bloody brick. And the day would come, sooner than she ever imagined, when all of this would turn around, and she'd realize exactly who she underestimated. There are moments in life that sneak up on you disguised as ordinary, a Tuesday afternoon, a cheap hotel coffee, or in my case, a hardware convention I almost didn't attend because I couldn't afford the gas money and felt like a fraud dragging my homemade prototype into a room full of polished executives and mass-manufactured gloss. But something inside me, maybe it was spite, maybe it was hope, maybe just the stubborn grit that kicks in when you've got nothing left to lose, told me to go anyway. I walked the aisles of that convention with a backpack full of hand-sketched pamphlets, a rusted metal prototype wrapped in an old hoodie, and no booth, no banner, no pitch deck. Just a story I hadn't told anyone yet and a product that fixed a problem no one seemed to talk about. And that's when I saw him, a short guy with oil-stained hands, squinting at some overpriced branded junk with the same skepticism I felt boiling in my chest. His name was Dave Mullins, a small-time distributor out of Ohio who supplied independent tool shops and mom-and-pop lumberyards. And that man, God bless him, changed my life with 5 words. That's exactly what I've needed. He didn't care that I was a nobody in a wrinkled flannel shirt with a prototype made in a basement between divorce hearings and graveyard shifts. What he did care about was that the tool worked flawlessly. I demoed it for him right there on a folding table someone had abandoned in the corner. He watched, asked questions, took it apart, nodded, and said, "You license this to me, I'll get it into hands that matter." We shook hands right there. No lawyers, no red tape. Just a handshake between 2 men who still believed in the value of things that work. Within 3 weeks, he had placed his first bulk order. Within 3 months, a viral TikTok video from a tool reviewer called it the smartest thing to hit tool belts in 20 years. And within a year, my inbox was overflowing with inquiries, contractors, big box retailers, warehouse suppliers, all wanting to carry my design, all offering money I never thought I'd see attached to my name. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't flash the cash or go buying Rolexes or sports cars. I kept my head down, kept refining the design, kept pushing inventory, and every time I got another glowing review or bulk order, I quietly added it to a folder labeled Legacy. Because while she was out there telling people I was a failure, a manipulator, a nobody, I was becoming something more dangerous than successful. I was becoming undeniable. And the beautiful part? She didn't know a damn thing about it yet. She thought I was still in that basement. Damn empire from the mud she tried to bury him in. There's a special kind of arrogance that comes from someone who thinks they've already won. The smugness in their voice, the rehearsed condescension in their smile, the way they speak at you instead of to you because, in their mind, your story's already over. That's how she walked into the courtroom, heels too high for the occasion, sunglasses still on indoors, flanked by a grinning lawyer who looked like he specialized in wrecking fathers during custody battles and vacationing off the alimony he helped secure. She didn't even glance in my direction as she filed past, clearly expecting me to show up alone, defeated, maybe in the same jeans I'd been wearing when she kicked me out of our house. But what she got instead was me in a navy three-piece tailored suit, polished shoes that hadn't seen drywall in months, and a legal team that outnumbered hers, all prepped, all armed, and all very familiar with the folder labeled receipts. I handed them the moment I could afford to fight back. She thought she'd steamroll me with her narrative claiming emotional abuse, painting herself as the victim of a broken man who forced her to find love elsewhere. But the thing about lies is they rot from the inside out, and under the scrutiny of discovery, hers crumbled like plaster over old wood. I submitted printouts of every bank withdrawal made without my consent, screenshots of her calling me a deadbeat while sipping wine with my former best friend, and photos timestamped with her wrapped around him during the same weekend she claimed to be at a grief retreat. My lawyer, a quiet bulldog of a man who barely blinked, laid it out without flourish or rage, just calm, surgical facts that told the court what kind of woman they were dealing with. Her expression shifted halfway through the proceedings, from confidence to confusion, from confusion to rage, and finally to a kind of quiet panic, the way someone looks when they realize they walked into a chess match thinking it was checkers. The judge saw through it. The accounts she emptied were deemed marital theft. Her public smears of my name were labeled as reputational damage. And the infidelity, well, that tipped the scales further than I expected. Not only did she lose her claim to alimony, but the judge ordered a financial penalty for malicious intent, meaning she owed me. She lost the house she tried to steal, the car I had paid off, and half of the new business assets I had kept under wraps until the court needed to see them. When the ruling was read aloud, she didn't even look at me, couldn't, because in that moment, it hit her that the man she humiliated in front of friends, betrayed with another man, and mocked on social media hadn't just survived, he'd outplayed her. And I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just buttoned my jacket, shook my lawyer's hand, and walked out into the sunlight feeling 20 pounds lighter, not because I'd won, but because I had earned my freedom the hard way. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't rent a penthouse with marble floors and panoramic views of a skyline I didn't care about. I didn't walk into my old neighborhood in a limbo just to prove a point, because when you've truly made peace with your past, you stop needing to set it on fire to keep yourself warm. What I did do was buy a cabin, up in the Blue Ridge, tucked behind a ridge of evergreens where the only sound at night is the wind combing through the trees and my dog's soft breathing as he sleeps at the foot of my bed. I named him Tank, 90 pounds of loyalty that never judges, never lies, never cheats. Every morning I wake up to birds instead of bickering, to silence instead of slammed doors, and I take my coffee on the porch in a flannel shirt and work boots like I've got nowhere to be, because I don't. My company runs itself now. Orders keep coming. Distributors keep multiplying. 7 figures in revenue, not dreams, not promises, real numbers sitting in accounts with my name on them. And the best part? No one sees it coming when they look at me. You wouldn't know it to see me. I drive a black F-250 lifted, but not obnoxiously. I wear jeans with grease stains and t-shirts that have been through more than most relationships. I don't flash watches or gold chains. I don't post selfies holding champagne on private jets. Instead, I send anonymous checks to veteran shelters in 3 different states because I remember what it felt like to sleep cold and broke and hopeless, not in a foxhole, but in a damn basement wondering if the world even noticed I existed. I sponsor toolkits for kids aging out of foster care who want to go into the trades. I back startup inventors who have ideas but no one in their corner. Not because I'm trying to build a brand, not because I want my name on a plaque, but because someone should have done that for me, and I sure as hell remember what it feels like when no one does. I don't tell people what I've earned. I let the piece on my face say it for me. There's a certain kind of power in not having to prove anything to anyone. I don't check her social media anymore. I don't keep up with what her life looks like. I don't need to. Because peace, real peace, doesn't come from revenge or validation or courtroom wins. It comes from knowing you rebuilt yourself with your own hands, from ashes to something unbreakable. And the truth is, I didn't just survive what she did to me. I became a man she wouldn't even recognize, not because I changed into someone new, but because I finally became the man I always was when no one else bothered to see him. The thing about karma is that it never needs an invitation. It shows up late, dressed in silence, and it never forgets a face. I didn't go looking for what happened to her. I didn't have to. Word trickled in like cold wind under a doorframe, quiet, persistent, and impossible to ignore. The man she'd replaced me with, her real love, the one she paraded around like a trophy, had left her about 6 months after our court date, apparently after draining what was left of her savings and ghosting her without so much as a text. Ironic, isn't it? The same guy who smirked across a steakhouse table, posing for selfies like he'd won some grand prize, bailed the moment her finances dried up and her social stock crashed. She tried to hold on to the house, but property taxes and maintenance swallowed her whole, and by the time I heard she'd moved out, it had already been sold, not by choice, but by necessity. Last I heard, she was living with her sister in a 2-bedroom apartment off the highway and working retail again, folding clothes for teenagers who rolled their eyes when she asked if they wanted a rewards card. She had aged, too, not in the way we all do, gracefully or with Time's quiet signature, but like someone who spent too many nights waiting on a call that never came, staring at photos that used to mean something and now just whispered reminders of everything she gambled and lost. People started telling me how bitter she'd become, a short with coworkers, guarded with old friends, withdrawn from the social scene she once dominated. She'd gone from sipping mimosas at brunch with the girls to clocking out late and driving a 10-year-old Camry with a cracked windshield and expired registration. And then, one night, as I was sorting through old files on my phone, it happened, the message. Facebook Messenger, can we talk? Just those 3 words sitting there like bait on a rusty hook. I stared at the screen for a full minute, thumb hovering over the reply button, wondering if she truly expected me to fold the way I used to give her even a sliver of space in the life she once scorched beyond recognition. I just let it sit there, blue checkmark glowing cold beneath her message, because some things don't need to be said, and some people don't deserve the closure they never once offered you. Leaving it on read wasn't petty. It wasn't revenge. It was the final chapter she never thought I'd write. The quiet, dignified refusal to ever again be dragged into her chaos, her mess, her consequences. And if she ever tells the story, I'm sure she'll say I was cruel for ignoring her. But you and I both know the truth. She already said everything she needed to when she let go of something real, chasing something she thought was better. There's a particular kind of silence that comes just before the sun crests the ridge. Not the dead quiet of emptiness, not the strained hush of tension, but a living silence, the kind that hums with peace, purpose, and the weightless comfort of knowing you don't owe anyone anything anymore. That's where I stood this morning, coffee mug warm in my hand, boots solid on the weathered wood of my porch, with tanks stretched out lazily at my feet, not a care in the world. The sky ahead was brushed in fire orange and bruised purple, painting the horizon with the kind of color you can't fake or manufacture. You have to earn mornings like that. It hit me as the wind stirred the pines and the first rays lit up the glass of my workshop down the hill, that this life I was living wasn't one I stumbled into or inherited. It was one I built from scratch, from dust, from the wreckage she left behind when she said I was no longer worth loving. I had everything now, not in the way she meant when she said success, with its brunches and social media likes and diamond-hard surfaces no one could feel anything through, but in the way that matters. I had clarity. I had dignity. I had quiet mornings and dogs that didn't lie and hands that remembered how to create instead of just clench. My business was thriving. My health was back. My name meant something again, not because I begged the world to believe in me, but because I kept showing up when no one was watching. She'd been wrong about a lot of things, wrong about who I was, what I could do, and who would stand by whom when the fire hit. But there was one thing she said that stuck with me, not because it hurt, but because, ironically, it turned out to be the only honest thing she ever gave me. She once told me, in a wine-soaked whisper laced with contempt, "You'll never find anyone better than me." And for a long time, I believed her, until I stopped trying to find someone else and started rebuilding the man she buried. And now, as I sip my coffee and watch the sun rise over a life that is fully, deeply mine, I can finally answer her. Not with a text, not with bitterness, but with a truth she'll never understand. She was right. I didn't find anyone better than her. I became better,